The engagement ring hit the hardwood floor with a sound that would echo in Maya Chen's nightmares for months to come. Not the dramatic crash of shattered crystal, but something worse. A hollow, metallic ping that seemed to mock the 3 years of love it represented. The diamond caught the afternoon light streaming through the kitchen window one last time before rolling under the refrigerator, disappearing like everything else that had mattered 5 minutes ago. "Don't," Maya whispered, her voice cracking as she watched David's shoulders shake with the kind of rage that comes from betrayal. His hands were trembling as he held his phone, the fabricated screenshot still glowing on the screen like digital poison. "Please, just listen to me." David's laugh was bitter, foreign. She'd never heard that sound come from the man who sang off-key in the shower and left her coffee shop doodles on the bathroom mirror. "Listen to you? Maya, I'm looking at the proof. Your own words. Your own... God, I can't even say it." He thrust the phone toward her again, and she could see her own face in those fake messages, her profile picture next to words she'd never written, conversations that had never happened. The screenshots were masterful in their cruelty. Text messages between her and someone named Marcus, complete with her contact photo and the familiar blue bubbles of iMessage. The conversations spanned weeks, showing a progression from friendly banter to explicit arrangements. Her supposed words burned on the screen: "David doesn't have to know," and "I can't wait to feel you again," and "He's working late tomorrow, come over at 8. Maya's stomach churned as she recognized the subtle artistry of the deception. The timestamps were consistent, the message bubbles perfectly aligned, even the battery percentage and signal strength in the screenshots matched her phone model. Someone had spent considerable time crafting this lie, studying the intimate details of her life to make the fabrication seamless. "Where did you get these?" she asked, though the sinking feeling in her chest already knew the answer. "Your brother came to see me at work today." David's voice was hollow now, the initial fury giving way to something worse, resignation. "He said he couldn't keep watching you hurt me. He said he'd been struggling with whether to tell me for weeks." Maya's legs gave out, and she sank into the kitchen chair where she'd eaten breakfast that morning, where David had kissed her forehead and promised to pick up dinner on his way home from the office. The chair where, just 8 hours ago, she'd been planning their wedding, scrolling through venue photos on her laptop while humming the song they'd chosen for their first dance. Danny did this? The words felt foreign in her mouth. Her brother Danny, who'd taught her to ride a bike, who'd walked her to school when kids made fun of her thick glasses, who'd punched Tommy Martinez in 7th grade for calling her a nerd. That Danny? But even as she asked, fragments of recent memory began arranging themselves into a terrible pattern. Danny's increasingly frequent visits to their apartment over the past month, his questions about David's work schedule, about their relationship, about their finances, the way he'd lingered near her phone when she went to the bathroom, how he'd offered to help her with the wedding planning website when she struggled with the password. "He showed me more than just the texts," David continued, his voice growing quieter with each word. "Photos of you two together. Hotel receipts with your name on them. He said he followed you last Tuesday when you said you were going to book club." Maya's mind reeled. Last Tuesday, she'd been at the dentist, then stopped by the pharmacy, then grabbed coffee with her coworker Lisa to discuss the new marketing campaign. She'd told David about all of it when she got home, shown him the funny meme Lisa had shared, complained about the Novocaine making her lip numb. "I was never at a hotel," but the words felt pathetic even to her own ears. How do you prove a negative? How do you convince someone that evidence fabricated with surgical precision is a lie? David sat down across from her, the kitchen table suddenly feeling vast as an ocean between them. This was the same table where they'd shared thousands of meals, where he had proposed 6 months ago with shaking hands and tears in his eyes. The ring had been hidden inside her favorite mug, the one with the chipped handle that she refused to throw away because it had belonged to her grandmother. "The thing is," David said, staring at his hands, "it all makes sense now. Why you've been so distracted lately. Why you've been working late more often. Why you seem distant when we were picking out wedding invitations." Maya wanted to scream. She'd been working late because their marketing firm had landed the Chen Industries account. A cruel irony, given that it was her father's company and the biggest client they'd ever secured. She'd been distracted because she was secretly planning David a surprise bachelor party, coordinating with his college friends who lived across the country. She'd seemed distant during wedding planning because she was overwhelmed by the decisions, not because her heart was elsewhere. But how do you explain coincidence to someone whose trust has been surgically removed? David, please, she reached across the table, but he pulled his hands away. I need you to think about what you know about me. Really know. Have I ever lied to you? Have I ever given you any reason to doubt me? For a moment, she saw uncertainty flicker across his features. They'd been together 3 years, lived together for 2. He'd seen her sick with food poisoning, stressed about her job, crying over her mother's cancer diagnosis. He'd held her through panic attacks and celebrated her small victories. He knew she cried during insurance commercials and that she'd never learned to parallel park. He knew she was terrible at lying, that her face turned red whenever she tried to keep even the smallest secret. But the phone in his hand was heavy with apparent evidence, and Maya could see him weighing 3 years of love against pixels on a screen. The Marcus in the messages, David said finally. Danny told me it's Marcus Rivera from your yoga class, the instructor. Maya's heart sank further. Marcus was indeed her yoga instructor, a kind man in his 40s who often stayed after class to chat with students about meditation and mindfulness. He'd recently gone through a divorce and sometimes seemed lonely, but their conversations had never been anything more than friendly. She'd mentioned him to David several times, how Marcus had helped her with her anxiety through breathing exercises, how he'd recommended a book on mindfulness that had really helped her. The genius of Danny's fabrication became clearer. He'd chosen someone real, someone David knew she interacted with regularly, the perfect frame for a perfect lie. Marcus is married, she said desperately. Well, he was married. He's going through a divorce, but he's not... We're not... God, David, he's old enough to be my father. Apparently that didn't matter to you. David's voice was getting colder, more distant. She could see him retreating into himself, building walls that might never come down. Maya's phone buzzed on the counter and both of them froze. The sound that had once meant connection, friends reaching out, family checking in, David sending her silly memes from work, now felt like a potential landmine. Any message could be twisted. Any innocent conversation could be recontextualized as evidence of guilt. She walked over and picked up the phone with trembling hands. A text from her mother. Honey, can you call me? Danny stopped by today and seemed upset. Is everything okay? The message felt like ice water in her veins. Danny had been busy today, hadn't he? First visiting David at work, now making rounds to their mother, building his story, laying groundwork for the lie that was about to destroy not just her engagement, but potentially her entire family. It's my mom, Maya said, showing David the screen. Danny went to see her too. For the first time since she'd walked into the kitchen, David looked uncertain. Why would he? Because he's building a case, Maya interrupted, the realization hitting her like a physical blow. Don't you see? This isn't just about us. He's making sure everyone believes it. Mom, probably Dad too, maybe my friends. By the time I figure out how to prove my innocence, the lie will have spread too far to contain. David stood up abruptly, began pacing the small kitchen. This was what he did when he was thinking hard, wore a path in the floor while his mind worked through problems. She'd watched him pace like this when he was deciding whether to take the job at the consulting firm, when his father had been in the hospital, when they'd been trying to decide whether to move in together. But why? He asked suddenly, stopping to face her. Maya, why would your own brother do this to you? What could he possibly gain? It was the question that had been lurking in the shadows of her mind since the moment she'd understood what was happening. Danny was her only sibling, 2 years older, and their relationship had always been complicated. He'd been protective of her growing up, but also competitive. When she'd gotten to Stanford and he'd had to settle for the local state school, he'd claimed to be proud, but she'd sensed resentment. When she'd landed the job at the marketing firm and started making good money, he'd made jokes about her fancy career that didn't quite feel like jokes. But this was beyond sibling rivalry. This was systematic destruction. "I don't know," she whispered, and the admission felt like defeat. "I honestly don't know." The kitchen fell silent except for the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of traffic outside their window. Their apartment was on the third floor of a converted Victorian in Oakland, with high ceilings and original hardwood floors. They'd fallen in love with it the moment they'd walked in, had imagined raising children here, growing old together in these rooms that caught the morning light so perfectly. Now, it felt like a crime scene. David picked up his phone again, scrolled through the fake messages with the expression of someone examining evidence at a trial. "The detail is incredible," he said quietly. "The way you supposedly talk about me in these messages, it sounds like you, the words you'd use, the way you phrase things." Maya felt her last hope crumbling. Of course the messages sounded like her. Danny had been listening to her talk for 26 years. He knew her speech patterns, her vocabulary, the way she complained about work stress and worried about their relationship. He could imitate her voice in text because he'd been studying it his entire life. "I need to go," David said suddenly, grabbing his jacket from the back of the chair. "I need to think." "Where are you going?" Panic flooded her voice. If he left now, she wasn't sure he'd come back. "I don't know, maybe to Brad's, maybe just anywhere but here." He stopped at the kitchen doorway, not turning around. "Maya, I want to believe you. You have to know that. But the evidence is overwhelming, and I can't look at you right now without seeing those messages." The front door closed with a soft click that sounded like the end of everything. Maya stood alone in the kitchen, surrounded by the detritus of their shattered life. The engagement ring was still under the refrigerator, the wedding planning binder still open to the page about catering options. Her phone buzzed again, another text from her mother, more insistent this time. "Maya, please call me. Danny told me some very concerning things." She sank back into the chair and stared at the phone, watching as the messages piled up. Her mother, her best friend Sarah, even her coworker Lisa. Danny's poison was already spreading through her life like ink and water. But as she sat there in the wreckage of her future, a small flame of anger began to kindle in her chest. Danny had made one crucial mistake in his perfect fabrication. He underestimated her. He counted on her crumbling, on accepting his version of reality without a fight. He assumed that once David left, once their family turned against her, she'd have no choice but to disappear quietly into the shame he had created for her. He was wrong. Then she was going to destroy him the same way he'd tried to destroy her, with the truth, delivered with surgical precision. But as she started making her list of people to contact, a terrible thought occurred to her. If Danny had gone to all this trouble to fabricate evidence, if he'd spent weeks or even months planning this elaborate deception, then he must have a reason. Something more than sibling jealousy or casual cruelty. What did her brother want badly enough to destroy her life to get it? Maya had always been a creature of routine, finding comfort in the predictable rhythms that structured her days. Each morning at 6:30 a.m., she'd wake to the gentle chime of her phone alarm, never jarring buzzer sounds, which reminded her too much of fire drills and emergency evacuations. She'd pad to the kitchen and her favorite flannel pajamas, the ones with tiny coffee cups printed on soft cotton that David had given her last Christmas, and start the coffee maker while checking the weather on her phone. But this morning, 18 hours after David had walked out of their kitchen and her life, Maya found herself staring at the ceiling at 4:47 a.m., having slept in 20-minute intervals between waves of anxiety that crashed over her like a fever. The coffee maker sat cold and unused. Her flannel pajamas lay crumpled on the floor where she'd changed into jeans and a sweater at 2 a.m., convinced she needed to drive to David's friend Brad's house to explain everything. Then changing back into pajamas when she realized she had no idea what she would say. The apartment felt different without David's presence, like a song missing its harmony. His coffee mug wasn't in the sink alongside hers. His laptop wasn't charging on the kitchen counter, quietly humming as it updated overnight. The bathroom felt cavernous without his toothbrush beside hers, without the familiar scatter of his contact lens case and reading glasses on the counter. Maya had always prided herself on her independence. She'd lived alone for 2 years before David moved in, had built a successful career, had never been the type to lose herself in a relationship. But now she realized how thoroughly their lives had intertwined, like ivy growing around a trellis. Removing David wasn't just losing a partner, it was losing half the architecture that held her daily world together. She made coffee with shaking hands, the familiar ritual providing a thin anchor to normalcy. The kitchen window faced east, and she watched the San Francisco Bay slowly emerge from darkness, the water shifting from black to deep purple to the pale gray of early dawn. This was usually her favorite kind of day, when the city was quiet and possibilities felt endless. Now the sunrise felt like a countdown. Another day she'd have to navigate this nightmare, another 24 hours of people she loved believing lies about her. Her phone had been buzzing intermittently throughout the night, messages from friends who'd heard something, family members asking if she was okay, even a concerned text from her yoga instructor, Marcus, that made her stomach churn with irony. "Hey Maya, your brother reached out yesterday asking about our classes. Hope everything okay. See you next week." Danny had been thorough. Not content with destroying her engagement, he was systematically poisoning every relationship in her life. But why Marcus? What had Danny told him? Maya pulled up Marcus's contact information, staring at his profile photo, a serene-looking man in his mid-40s with kind eyes and graying temples. In the fabricated screenshots, this face had been paired with explicit messages I'd supposedly sent, intimate words that made my skin crawl to read. How do you explain to someone that they've been unwittingly cast in a lie designed to destroy your life? She started typing a response 3 different times, deleting each attempt. How do you begin that conversation? "Hi, Marcus. My brother has created fake text messages between us to convince my fiancé I'm cheating with you. Hope you're having a good morning." The absurdity of the situation might have been funny if it weren't destroying everything she'd built. Maya had spent her entire adult life being careful, responsible, honest to a fault. In college, she'd returned a wallet she'd found with $300 in cash, tracking down the owner through their student ID. At work, she always gave credit to team members who contributed to projects, even when it meant less recognition for herself. She'd never even cheated on a test, let alone on the person she planned to marry. But character meant nothing in the face of fabricated evidence. Danny understood this. He'd weaponized her own integrity against her, knowing that her first instinct would be to try to explain, to reason, to prove her innocence through words, rather than recognizing that this was war. Maya's laptop sat open on the kitchen table, still displaying the wedding planning website she'd been working on yesterday afternoon. The page showed a comparison chart of venues they'd been considering. The historic mansion in Sonoma with the Rose Garden, the modern art museum in downtown San Francisco, the rustic winery in Napa Valley where David's grandparents had been married 50 years ago. She'd spent hours researching each option, reading reviews, calculating costs, imagining their wedding day in each location. Now, the page felt like archaeological evidence of a civilization that had been suddenly wiped out. She closed the laptop and walked to the living room, where framed photos documented the 3 years of her relationship with David. Their first vacation together in Big Sur, both of them sunburned and grinning on the beach. The Christmas morning when they'd exchanged keys to each other's apartments, a symbolic step toward moving in together. The night he'd proposed, her face shocked and tearful and radiant in the photo Brad had secretly taken when David got down on one knee at their favorite restaurant. In every photo, Maya saw the same thing: genuine happiness. Not the performative joy of social media, but the quiet contentment of 2 people who'd found something real together. She and David fit. Their humor, their values, their dreams for the future, they balanced each other. She grounded his tendency toward anxiety, while he encouraged her to take risks and trust herself. Or at least, she thought they fit. The speed with which David had believed Danny's lie suggested that maybe their foundation wasn't as solid as she'd imagined. Maybe there had been cracks she hadn't noticed, doubts he'd harbored that made the fabricated evidence seem plausible. The thought was almost as painful as the betrayal itself.
Maya's phone rang, jolting her from her spiral of self-doubt. Her mother's name appeared on the screen, and Maya felt her chest tighten. Their conversation last night had been brief and painful. Her mother's voice confused and hurt as she asked if the things Danny had told her were true. Maya had tried to explain, but how do you convince someone that their son has orchestrated an elaborate campaign of destruction against their daughter? How do you ask a mother to choose between their children? "Hi, Mom," Maya answered, her voice hoarse from crying and sleeplessness. "Honey, I've been awake all night thinking about our conversation." Patricia Chen's voice carried the weight of 48 years of motherhood, the particular exhaustion that comes from watching your children hurt each other and knowing you can't fix it. "I need you to help me understand what's happening." Maya walked to the window, pressing her forehead against the cool glass. Below, the city was waking up. People walking dogs, heading to work, living normal lives uncontaminated by family betrayal. "Mom, I know how this looks. I know Danny showed you those messages, and I know they seem real. But I need you to believe me when I tell you that I never wrote those words. I never cheated on David. I would never do that." "But, sweetheart, why would Danny make something like this up? He was so upset when he came to see me yesterday. He said it was tearing him apart, knowing what you were doing, but not knowing how to tell David." Maya closed her eyes, picturing Danny in their mother's kitchen, playing the role of the anguished brother burdened by terrible knowledge. He'd always been a good actor. In high school, he'd starred in the drama club productions, had even considered majoring in theater before choosing business instead. Those skills were serving him well now. "I don't know why he did it," Maya said quietly. "But Mom, think about the timing. David and I just signed the lease for our new apartment. We're supposed to close on it next month. We've been saving for 2 years to buy a place. Why would I sabotage all of that now?" There was silence on the other end, and Maya could picture her mother sitting at the kitchen table where Maya had eaten countless breakfasts growing up, where she'd done homework while her mother cooked dinner, where they'd had serious conversations about boys and college and career choices.
"Your father thinks we should stay out of it," Patricia finally said. "He says it's between you and Danny and David, and we shouldn't take sides." "And what do you think?" Another long pause. "I think my daughter has never lied to me about anything important. Even when you broke Mrs. Patterson's window with that baseball when you were 8, you came and told me immediately. Even when you crashed the car senior year, you called me from the side of the road in tears, worried about disappointing us more than about the accident itself." Maya felt tears burning her eyes. "I'm not lying now, Mom." "I know, honey. In my heart, I know. But those messages, they look so real. And Danny seemed so certain, so heartbroken about it. Because Danny created them. He's good with computers, Mom. He works in tech. He knows how to make fake screenshots that look authentic. But why would he? I don't know." The words came out sharper than Maya intended, frustration bleeding through her careful composure. "I'm sorry. I don't mean to snap at you. It's just, I've been asking myself the same question all night. What does Danny gain from destroying my relationship? What's worth hurting me this badly?" Maya heard her mother's soft intake of breath. Patricia Chen had spent 26 years navigating the complex dynamics between her two children. Danny's competitiveness, Maya's tendency toward perfectionism, the way they could support each other fiercely one day and clash brutally the next. But this was beyond anything that had come before. "There's something else," Patricia said quietly. "Something Danny told me yesterday that I didn't mention last night because I was too shocked by everything else." Maya's stomach dropped. "What?" "He said you'd been asking him about the family business, about whether your father was planning to change his will, about what would happen to the company when he retires. He made it sound like you were being calculating about it, like you were planning ahead for financial gain." The pieces clicked together so suddenly that Maya had to sit down. Her father's company, Chen Industries, was a mid-sized import business that specialized in electronics and components. It had grown significantly over the past decade, and while her parents lived modestly, the company was worth several $1 million. Maya had always assumed it would be divided between her and Danny eventually, but she had never asked about specifics because the topic felt morbid and mercenary. But Danny had been asking. Over the past year, Maya remembered him bringing up their parents' retirement plans, asking about succession planning, even suggesting that he should take a more active role in the business since he had the technical background, and Maya was focused on her own career. Mom, when did Danny start asking about Dad's will? Oh, honey, it's been going on for months. He's been very concerned about the future of the company, about making sure everything is handled properly when your father steps down. Maya felt the final piece of the puzzle slide into place. Danny wasn't just trying to destroy my relationship for the sake of cruelty. He was eliminating competition. If Maya was revealed as a cheater, a liar, someone willing to betray the person she claimed to love most, how would that reflect on her character in their parents' eyes? How would that impact their father's decision about who should inherit the family business? A person who would cheat on their fiancé couldn't be trusted with a multi-million-dollar company. A person who would lie so convincingly about their infidelity couldn't be trusted with the family's legacy. Danny was playing a long game, and Maya's relationship with David was just collateral damage in his campaign for control of their father's empire. Mom, has Danny talked to Dad about taking over the business? Well, yes, he's been very proactive about it, actually. He's created spreadsheets about modernizing operations, talked about expanding into new markets. Your father has been impressed with his initiative.
Of course he had. While Maya had been focused on building her own career, planning her wedding, living her life, Danny had been positioning himself as the obvious successor to their father's business. The dutiful son with the technical expertise and business acumen ready to carry on the Chen family legacy. All he needed was to eliminate the competition. Maya stood up abruptly, pacing to the kitchen window. The sun was fully up now, casting long shadows across the courtyard below. Somewhere in this city, David was probably waking up in Brad's guest room, maybe checking his phone to see if she'd tried to contact him. Somewhere else, Danny was probably having coffee and reading the news, satisfied with his handiwork, confident that his plan was working perfectly. But Maya had advantages Danny didn't know about. She understood technology too, not to his level, but enough to know that digital evidence could be examined, traced, verified, or disproven. She had friends in the industry, people who specialized in digital forensics and cybersecurity. And most importantly, she had something Danny didn't expect: the fury of someone who'd been systematically betrayed by the person who was supposed to protect her. Mom, I need to ask you for something, and it's going to be hard. Anything, sweetheart. I need you not to discuss this with Danny. Don't tell him we talked. Don't tell him what you're thinking. I need time to figure out how to prove what really happened, and I can't do that if he knows I'm fighting back. There was a long pause. Maya, he's my son too. I know, and I'm not asking you to turn against him. I'm asking you to give me the chance to prove my innocence before this goes any further. Can you do that? Yes, Patricia said quietly. Yes, I can do that. After they hung up, Maya sat in the growing morning light and began to plan. She made lists on her laptop, people she needed to contact, evidence she needed to gather, experts she needed to consult. The fabricated screenshots were sophisticated, but they weren't perfect. Nothing created by human hands ever was. Danny had made his first move, and it had been devastating in its precision, but chess wasn't won in the opening gambit. Maya had been playing defense since the moment David had thrown her ring on the floor, but defense wasn't going to save her relationship or her family or her reputation. It was time to go on the offense. The first call she made was to her friend Jennifer, who worked in cybersecurity for a tech company in Silicon Valley. The second was to a private investigator her law professor had mentioned during a guest lecture about digital evidence. The third was to take a personal day from work because what she was about to undertake would require all of her time, energy, and resources. Danny thought he'd destroyed her. Instead, he'd just motivated her to become the most dangerous version of herself. Maya's first stop was a nondescript office building in downtown San Francisco, where Jennifer Park worked as a senior cybersecurity analyst for a fintech startup. They'd been roommates at Stanford, bonding over late-night study sessions and their shared experience as first-generation Asian-American college students navigating expectations from family and society. Jennifer was brilliant, methodical, and had zero tolerance for bullshit, exactly what Maya needed right now. "Show me everything," Jennifer said, without preamble, ushering Maya into a conference room lined with whiteboards covered in complex network diagrams and code snippets. Jennifer was small and compact, with purple streaks in her black hair and the focused intensity of someone who spent her days hunting down digital threats. Maya pulled out her phone and laptop, hands trembling slightly as she opened the screenshots David had shown her. Even seeing them again made her feel sick, but she forced herself to examine them with Jennifer's clinical eye. "Okay, first impression," Jennifer said, studying the images with professional detachment. "These are good. Whoever made them understands the visual language of iOS messaging. The bubble colors, the timestamp formatting, the way the contact photo aligns with the message threads, it all looks authentic at first glance."
But, Maya asked, hearing the hesitation in her friend's voice, but authenticity and accuracy are different things. Come here, look at this. Jennifer pulled up photo editing software on her laptop and loaded one of the screenshots. See this timestamp here? It says 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday. But look at the battery indicator in the top right corner. It shows 87% battery life. Maya squinted at the tiny details in the corner of the screen. Is that significant? Your brother would have needed your phone to create screenshots this detailed, right? Or at least extensive knowledge of your phone's interface, your contact list, your messaging patterns. Jennifer zoomed in on another part of the image, but he made some assumptions about your habits. You're obsessive about charging your phone at night. I remember that from college. You had that charging station next to your bed, and you'd plug in your phone every single night before sleeping. Maya nodded. It was true. She'd had anxiety about her phone dying during emergencies ever since getting stranded with a dead battery during a college road trip. So, if you were really sending intimate messages at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday night, your phone would most likely be plugged in and charging, or at least have a higher battery percentage than 87%. It's a small detail, but it suggests these weren't captured from your actual phone in real time. Jennifer continued her analysis, pointing out other subtle inconsistencies. The font rendering was slightly off in some of the messages, suggesting they'd been created on a different device or operating system. The message delivery indicators, the delivered and read receipts, didn't align properly with the timeline of the conversation. And most tellingly, some of the metadata embedded in the image files showed creation dates from the past few weeks, not from the dates shown in the supposed conversations. Your brother is technically sophisticated, but he's not a professional forger. These screenshots would fool most people, including law enforcement or lawyers who don't specialize in digital forensics, but they're not perfect. Maya felt the first stirring of hope she had experienced since yesterday. Is this enough to prove they're fake? It's a start, but Maya, proving something is fabricated is much harder than creating convincing fabrications. Courts and people's minds don't work on the principle of reasonable doubt when it comes to digital evidence. They tend to assume that if something looks real, it probably is. Jennifer saved her analysis to a secure drive and handed Maya a USB stick with copies of everything. We need more than technical inconsistencies. We need to prove how these were created, when, and by whom. Do you have access to your brother's devices or accounts? Maya shook her head. We're not exactly close enough for him to share his passwords with me. What about your parents? Family computer, shared accounts, anything like that? Maybe. My mom sometimes uses Danny's laptop when hers is acting up, and my dad still has this old desktop computer in his study that everyone uses occasionally. Jennifer's eyes lit up. That's promising. Digital forensics is like archaeology. People think they can delete things permanently, but traces always remain. If your brother used any shared devices or networks to create these fakes, we might be able to find evidence. Maya's second stop was the office of Rebecca Santos, the private investigator her law professor had recommended. Rebecca specialized in what she called domestic digital investigations, cases involving cyberstalking, revenge porn, and other forms of technology-enabled abuse. Her office was in a converted warehouse in the Mission District, stark and functional, with multiple monitors and the kind of heavy-duty shredder that suggested serious privacy concerns. "I've seen cases like this before," Rebecca said after Maya explained the situation. "Family members, ex-partners, even business rivals creating fake evidence to destroy reputations. The technology has made it easier, but the motivations are as old as humanity." Rebecca was in her 40s with graying hair pulled back in a no-nonsense ponytail and the calm competence of someone who'd spent years dealing with other people's crises. Took notes on a legal pad as Maya walked through the timeline, asking sharp questions about Danny's access to her information, his technical skills, and his potential motivations. "The inheritance angle makes sense," Rebecca said. "I've worked 3 similar cases in the past 2 years. Family members sabotaging each other to influence estate planning. It's more common than people realize, especially in immigrant families where the first generation has built significant wealth." Maya winced at the casual way Rebecca categorized her family's dysfunction, but she couldn't deny the accuracy. "Here's what we need to establish," Rebecca continued, outlining a strategy on her whiteboard. "First, opportunity. When and how your brother could have accessed the information needed to create convincing fakes. Second, technical capability. Proof that he has the skills and tools needed for this level of fabrication. Third, motive. Evidence that he stands to gain from your disgrace. And fourth, if possible, the actual digital trail showing how and when the fakes were created." Rebecca's approach was methodical and comprehensive. She would investigate Danny's social media activity, his online purchases, looking for photo editing software or digital forensics tools, his work history and technical certifications. She would also look into the family business situation, documenting the financial incentives that might drive Danny's behavior. "This isn't going to be fast or cheap," Rebecca warned. "And there's no guarantee we'll find smoking gun evidence. Your brother seems smart and careful. But most people, even careful people, leave traces. We just have to know where to look." Maya authorized the investigation, feeling her savings account take a significant hit, but knowing she had no choice. Her reputation, her relationship, and potentially her family's future were at stake. Her third stop was the most difficult, David's office building in the financial district. She'd called ahead and asked Brad, David's best friend and coworker, if he could meet her for coffee. Brad had been David's roommate in college, the best man at his older brother's wedding, and one of the few people who knew David well enough to potentially influence his thinking. They met at a small cafe around the corner from his office, the kind of place that catered to financial district workers with expensive espresso and minimalist decor. Brad looked uncomfortable as he approached her table, his usually easy smile replaced by the careful neutrality of someone trying to navigate a friend's relationship crisis. "Maya," he said, sitting down across from her with a cup of black coffee. "I have to be honest, but David asked me not to talk to you about this." "I know," Maya said, wrapping her hands around her own cup for warmth. "But Brad, you've known me for 3 years. Do you really think I'm capable of what Danny's accusing me of?" Brad was quiet for a long moment, studying her face. He was a thoughtful person, careful with his words, which was probably why David had confided in him. "Honestly, no. It doesn't fit with the person I know. But Maya, the evidence is really convincing. Those screenshots, the hotel receipts, the timeline Danny laid out, it all fits together too perfectly to ignore." "That's exactly why it's fake," Maya said urgently. "Real affairs are messy, Brad. They're inconsistent and full of mistakes and contradictions. What Danny created is too perfect because he had the luxury of crafting every detail to fit his narrative." She pulled out her phone and showed Brad the technical analysis Jennifer had conducted, walking him through the inconsistencies they'd discovered. Brad listened carefully, his expression growing more thoughtful as she explained the battery percentage discrepancies and metadata anomalies. "This is interesting," he said finally. "But Maya, why would Danny do this? What's his endgame?" Maya explained about the family business, about Danny's increasing interest in their father's succession planning, about the financial incentives that might drive someone to eliminate competition for a multi-million-dollar inheritance. "Jesus," Brad muttered. That's really dark. Like sociopathic dark." "I know how it sounds. But Brad, I need you to think about what you know about David and me. Have you ever seen any signs that I was unhappy in our relationship? Any indication that I was looking elsewhere?" Brad shook his head slowly. "No. If anything, you guys seemed more solid than most couples I know. David talks about you constantly at work. What you're cooking for dinner, funny things you said, plans you're making together. He lights up when he talks about you."
"Then help me," Maya said, leaning forward across the small table. "I'm not asking you to betray David's trust. I'm asking you to help him see that he's being manipulated by someone who wants to destroy our relationship for personal gain." Brad was quiet for a long time, staring into his coffee cup. When he finally looked up, Maya saw something like determination in his eyes. "David's staying at my place indefinitely," he said. "He's hurt and angry, but I think part of him wants to believe you're innocent. The problem is he's scared of being a fool. He'd rather believe painful truth than comforting lies. What if I could prove they are lies? Then I think he'd listen. But, Maya, the proof would have to be absolute, not just technical inconsistencies or circumstantial evidence. David's an engineer. He needs data that's unambiguous." Maya nodded, understanding the challenge ahead of her. David's analytical mind, which she'd always loved about him, was now working against her. He would require proof that met the same standards he applied to his professional work: rigorous, comprehensive, and undeniable. After leaving Brad, Maya drove to her parents' house in Fremont, the modest suburban home where she'd grown up. The neighborhood was quiet in the mid-afternoon, with sprinklers running on front lawns and the distant sound of children playing in backyards. This had been her safe haven growing up, the place she returned to for holidays and family dinners and quiet Sunday afternoons. Now it felt like enemy territory. Her mother answered the door with red-rimmed eyes and the careful expression of someone trying to hold their family together through sheer force of will. "Danny's not here," her mother said before Maya could ask. "He's at work." "Good. Mom, I need your help with something, and I need you to trust me." Maya explained about her investigation, about the technical evidence Jennifer had found, about the potential digital traces that might remain on family computers or devices. Patricia listened with growing distress, occasionally pressing a hand to her chest as if the conversation was physically painful. "You're asking me to spy on my own son," Patricia said, finally. "I'm asking you to help me prove my innocence," Maya corrected. "Mom, if I'm right about this, then Danny has spent weeks or months planning to destroy my life. If I'm wrong, then your investigation won't find anything, and you'll have helped prove that I'm lying." It was a risk, offering her mother the chance to confirm Maya's guilt if the evidence pointed that way. But Maya was confident in her innocence, and she needed Patricia to understand the stakes of what they were dealing with. Patricia led Maya to the study where their parents kept his desktop computer, an ancient Dell that he refused to replace because it still works fine for email and reading the news. Maya had used this computer countless times growing up, for school projects and college applications, and keeping in touch with friends. The desktop background was a photo from last year's vacation to Lake Tahoe, all four of them smiling on the deck of their rental cabin. Maya felt a stab of pain seeing the photo image. They'd been happy then, genuinely happy. Danny had taught her to paddleboard that weekend, patiently coaching her through her fear of falling into the cold water. That version of her brother felt like a different person entirely. Maya opened the browser history and began scrolling through recent activity. Most of it was their father's routine browsing, news sites, email, the occasional YouTube video about home improvement projects.
But mixed in with the innocent family computer usage, Maya found something that made her pulse quicken. "Mom, look at this," she said, pointing to entries in the browser history from 2 weeks ago. Multiple visits to websites about photo editing, iPhone screenshot manipulation, and even a tutorial video titled "How to Create Convincing Fake Text Messages." Patricia leaned over Maya's shoulder, reading the browser history with growing alarm. "This doesn't necessarily mean anything," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Maybe Danny was just curious about how these things work. Maybe he was trying to understand how someone might have faked messages to frame you." Maya clicked on the browser's download history and found more damning evidence. Photo editing software downloaded 2 weeks ago, along with several iPhone interface templates and font packages that would be necessary for creating convincing fake screenshots. But the most damning evidence was in the computer's temporary files folder. Using techniques Jennifer had taught her, Maya recovered deleted image files from the past month. Most were innocent, family photos, screenshots of news articles, random internet images. But buried among them were multiple versions of the fake text message conversations, showing the evolution of Danny's fabrication. The earliest versions were crude, with obvious formatting errors and unrealistic dialogue, but Maya could see how Danny had refined his work over time, perfecting the visual details and crafting increasingly convincing conversations. The final versions matched exactly the screenshots David had shown her yesterday. "Oh my God," Patricia whispered, staring at the evidence of her son's systematic deception. "Maya, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." Maya felt tears threatening, but she forced herself to stay focused. This was exactly the kind of evidence Rebecca had said they would need. Digital artifacts showing not just that the screenshots were fake, but exactly how and when they'd been created. "Mom, I need you to call Rebecca Santos, the private investigator I told you about. We need to document all of this properly, with legal chain of custody, so it can be used as evidence." But even as Maya spoke, she heard the sound of a car pulling into the driveway. Through the study window, she could see Danny's silver Honda Civic parking behind her own car. "He's home," Patricia said, her voice tight with anxiety. Maya's mind raced through her options. She could confront Danny directly, but that would give him the chance to destroy additional evidence or craft new lies. She could slip out the back door and continue her investigation in secret, but that felt cowardly and would leave her mother to deal with the fallout alone. Instead, she made a decision that surprised even herself. She copied all the incriminating files to a flash drive, sent them to Rebecca's secure email, and then cleared the computer's history to hide her investigation. By the time Danny walked through the front door, Maya was sitting at the kitchen table with her mother, drinking tea as if this were a normal family visit. "Maya," Danny said, stopping short when he saw her, "I didn't expect to see you here." For the first time since this nightmare began, Maya had the advantage of knowledge. She knew Danny was lying, but he didn't know that she knew that. She studied her brother's face, looking for signs of guilt or anxiety, but his expression showed only mild surprise and what appeared to be genuine concern. "Maya, I needed to talk to Mom about everything that's happening, about the messages you showed David." Danny sat down across from them, his body language open and relaxed. If Maya hadn't just seen proof of his deception, she would never have suspected him of such elaborate manipulation. He was that good at lying, that comfortable with his own cruelty. "Maya, I know you're angry with me," Danny said, his voice filled with what sounded like sincere regret. "But I couldn't keep watching you hurt David. As your brother, I had a responsibility to tell him the truth."
The truth, Maya repeated, testing the word in her mouth like something foreign. "I know it's hard to accept," Danny continued, "but maybe this is ultimately for the best. If you weren't happy with David, if you needed something else, then it's better for everyone to be honest about it now, rather than after you're married." Maya marveled at his performance. Danny wasn't just lying, he was rewriting reality, creating a narrative where his destruction of her life was actually an act of love and protection. It was sociopathic in its completeness. "Where did you get those screenshots, Danny?" Maya asked quietly. Marcus sent them to me, Danny replied without hesitation. He felt terrible about the affair, but he said you convinced him that your relationship with David was already over. When he realized you were still engaged, he decided to come clean. Another lie, delivered with perfect sincerity. Maya wondered how many hours Danny had spent crafting this story, planning for every possible question or challenge. He'd created not just fake evidence, but an entire fictional framework to support his accusations. "Have you talked to Marcus recently?" Maya asked, knowing from his earlier text that Danny had contacted him, but curious about what Danny had told. "Yesterday, after I spoke with David. Marcus is a good man, Maya. He was devastated when he realized how he'd been manipulated." Maya felt a surge of rage so intense that she had to grip her teacup to keep her hands from shaking. Danny wasn't content with destroying her relationship with David. He was also destroying innocent people like Marcus, casting them as unwilling participants in affairs that had never happened. "I should go," Maya said, standing abruptly before her anger betrayed her. "I have some things I need to take care of." Danny stood as well, and for a moment they faced each other across the kitchen table where they'd eaten thousands of meals as children. Maya searched his face for any sign of the brother who'd protected her from bullies, who'd helped her with math homework, who'd driven her to and from soccer practice when their parents were working late. That person was either gone or had never existed at all. "Maya," Danny said as she headed toward the door, "I hope you can find a way to be honest about what happened, not just with David, but with yourself. Admitting mistakes is the first step toward making things right." Maya turned back to look at him one last time. "You're absolutely right, Danny. Admitting mistakes is exactly what needs to happen." She walked out of the house where she'd grown up, carrying with her the evidence that would destroy her brother's life the same way he'd tried to destroy hers. But as she drove away, Maya felt no satisfaction, only a deep sadness for the family that was about to be torn apart forever. The war Danny had started was about to enter its final phase, and Maya was no longer playing defense. By evening, Maya had assembled what Rebecca called a prosecutorial grade case: the digital forensics evidence from Jennifer, the computer artifacts from her parents' house, financial records showing Danny's purchases of photo editing software, and witness statements from family friends about Danny's increasing interest in the family business. Rebecca had worked through the afternoon to document everything properly, creating a comprehensive report that read like a criminal investigation. "This is some of the most systematic familial sabotage I've ever seen," she told Maya as they reviewed the findings. "Your brother didn't just create fake evidence. He created an entire alternate reality designed to destroy your credibility." The final piece of evidence came from an unexpected source: Marcus Rivera himself. When Rebecca contacted him as part of her investigation, Marcus had been confused and alarmed to learn that he'd supposedly been having an affair with Maya. He provided his own phone records and screenshots, showing that his only communication with Maya had been about yoga classes and mindfulness techniques.
More importantly, Marcus revealed that Danny had contacted him the day before yesterday, claiming to be conducting a wellness check on Maya because the family was concerned about her mental health. Danny had asked probing questions about Marcus's interactions with Maya, about her behavior in yoga class, about whether she'd ever seemed inappropriately interested in him. Preparing and narrating this type of story took us long efforts and hard work. So if you are enjoying the story, please consider subscribing to our channel. At the time, Marcus had found the conversation odd, but had answered honestly, not realizing that his innocent responses were being weaponized to support Danny's fabricated narrative. "He was gathering intelligence," Rebecca explained, "making sure his fake affair scenario would align with reality closely enough to be believable. It's the kind of detailed preparation you'd expect from someone planning a major fraud." As the sun set over San Francisco Bay, Maya sat in her empty apartment with 3 phones in front of her. Hers, Jennifer's secure device,
and a burner phone Rebecca had given her for sensitive communications. The evidence was overwhelming, undeniable, and devastating. Tomorrow, she would call David and ask him to meet her somewhere neutral. She would present him with the complete case against Danny, walking him through each piece of evidence with the methodical precision his engineering mind required. Tomorrow, she would also call her parents and reveal the truth about their son, watching their faith in their family crumble under the weight of documented betrayal. Tomorrow, she would decide whether to pursue criminal charges against Danny for fraud, harassment, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. But tonight, Maya grieved for the brother she thought she had, for the family she thought was unbreakable, and for the innocence that had been permanently lost when someone she loved had chosen to destroy her life for money. The ring was still under the refrigerator, forgotten in the chaos of the past day. Maya got down on her hands and knees and retrieved it, holding the small circle of gold and diamond in her palm. It felt impossibly light for something that had represented the weight of commitment, the promise of forever. Tomorrow would bring justice and vindication and the restoration of truth. Tonight, she sat alone in the darkness and wondered if any of them would ever be the same. Maya chose the same cafe where she'd met Brad, reasoning that neutral territory might help David approach the conversation with an open mind. She arrived 30 minutes early, claiming a corner table where they could speak privately, her laptop bag heavy with printed evidence reports and the weight of everything she was about to reveal. David walked in at exactly 2 p.m., punctual as always, but Maya barely recognized the man approaching her table. His usually neat hair was disheveled, his dress shirt wrinkled, and there were dark circles under his eyes that spoke of sleepless nights and exhausting emotional labor. He moved like someone carrying invisible weight, and Maya felt her heart break all over again, seeing what Danny's lies had done to the person she loved most. "Thank you for coming," Maya said, as David sat down across from her, maintaining careful distance, even in the small space. "Brad said you had new information. But Maya, I need you to understand, I can't go through this again. If you're going to try to explain away what I saw, if you're going to ask me to ignore evidence, I'm not going to ask you to ignore evidence. I'm going to show you what real evidence looks like." She opened her laptop and pulled out the printed reports, organizing them on the small table between them. David's expression shifted from resignation to curiosity as he saw the professional formatting, the technical diagrams, and the official letterheads from Jennifer's cybersecurity firm and Rebecca's investigation agency. "David, I want you to look at something first," Maya said, pulling up one of the fake screenshots on her laptop screen. "This message here, where I supposedly wrote, 'David doesn't have to know,' look at the timestamp." David leaned forward, studying the image with the focused attention Maya remembered from their early dates when he'd explain engineering concepts with the same careful precision. It says 11:47 p.m. on Tuesday, March 15th.
Now look at this. Maya opened her phone's photo album and scrolled to March 15th, showing David a selfie she'd taken that evening. In the background, clearly visible, was their living room TV, displaying the end credits of a movie they'd watched together. This photo has metadata showing it was taken at 11:52 p.m. that same night, Maya explained, 5 minutes after I supposedly sent that message to Marcus. But David, look at the photo. I'm in our apartment, in my pajamas, with you visible in the reflection on the TV screen behind me. David stared at the photo, then at the fake screenshot, his engineering mind working through the logical impossibility of what Danny's evidence claimed. "That doesn't necessarily prove anything," he said, but Maya could hear uncertainty creeping into his voice. "Maybe the timestamp on the fake message is wrong." "You're right to be skeptical," Maya said, pulling out Jennifer's technical analysis. That's exactly the kind of critical thinking I need you to apply to everything Danny showed you. For the next hour, Maya walked David through the digital forensics report, explaining each technical inconsistency in terms he could understand and verify. David's background in engineering made him the perfect audience for Jennifer's findings. He understood metadata, file compression, and the subtle technical signatures that revealed digital manipulation. Maya watched his expression change as he absorbed the evidence, saw the moment when professional skepticism gave way to dawning realization. David wasn't just looking at proof of Danny's deception, he was understanding the sophisticated level of planning and technical skill required to create such convincing lies. Jesus Christ, David muttered, studying the recovered files from her parents' computer. Maya, this is systematic. Your brother spent weeks creating these fakes. There's more, Maya said, pulling out Rebecca's investigation report. This is what a private investigator found when she looked into Danny's activities and motivations. David read through the financial analysis, the documentation of Danny's interest in the family business, the witness statements from family friends about his increasing questions regarding inheritance and succession planning. Maya watched him piece together the larger picture, saw the moment when you understood that their relationship hadn't been destroyed by infidelity, but by calculated financial manipulation. He used me, David said quietly, the words heavy with hurt and anger. Danny used my love for you as a weapon against you. Maya felt tears burning her eyes, not just from relief, but from seeing David's pain. I'm so sorry you went through this. I'm sorry he made you doubt what we have. David was quiet for a long time, staring at the evidence spread across their table like pieces of a puzzle that finally formed a coherent picture. When he looked up at Maya, she saw something that had been missing from his eyes since yesterday: trust. I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Anything. The reason I believe Danny so quickly, Maya, I've been feeling insecure about our relationship lately, about whether I'm enough for you, whether you'd be happier with someone more successful or ambitious. When Danny showed me those messages, part of me thought maybe they confirmed fears I'd already been having.
Maya nodded, seeing how completely Danny had manipulated not just the digital evidence, but the emotional landscape of their relationship. He'd identified David's vulnerabilities and crafted his lies to exploit them, making his fabrications feel not just plausible, but inevitable. "What do we do now?" David asked. Maya had been dreading this question because she knew her answer would sound harsh, possibly even cruel. But Danny's actions had moved far beyond family drama or sibling rivalry. He'd committed serious crimes in service of destroying her life, and the scoop of his deception demanded a proportional response. "We press charges," Maya said quietly. "Criminal fraud, cyber harassment, intentional infliction of emotional distress. Rebecca thinks we have grounds for a federal case because Danny used electronic communications to commit fraud across state lines." David's eyes widened. "Maya, that could destroy his life, his career, his future?" "He tried to destroy mine first," Maya said, her voice steady despite the emotional weight of what she was saying. "David, if we don't pursue this, if we just quietly reconcile and pretend none of this happened, what message does that send? That family members can commit elaborate fraud against each other without consequences? That someone can try to destroy an innocent person's life and face no accountability?" Maya pulled out her phone and showed David the messages that had been pouring in from yesterday. Friends who'd heard rumors, colleagues who were questioning her judgment, even her yoga instructor expressing confusion about the situation. Danny's lies hadn't just targeted David, they'd spread through Maya's entire social and professional network like a virus. "My reputation may never fully recover from this," Maya said. "Some people will always wonder if the accusations were true, even after seeing proof that they were fabricated. Danny knew that when he started this campaign. He counted on the fact that proving innocence is harder than creating doubt."
David studied the messages, seeing the broader impact of Danny's actions. "Okay," he said finally. "What's our next step?" Maya felt a surge of gratitude for that word, our. David wasn't just believing her innocence, he was choosing to stand with her against the person who tried to destroy them both. "First, we call my parents and show them everything. They need to understand what their son has done before this goes public through legal proceedings. And then we rebuild our trust, our relationship, our future. But David, I need you to understand this is going to be messy and painful and public. Danny won't just accept responsibility and apologize. He'll fight back, probably claim that I fabricated the evidence against him, maybe even suggest that our reconciliation proves his accusations were true. Are you prepared for that level of scrutiny and conflict?" David was quiet for a moment, considering the road ahead. When he spoke, his voice carried the determination Maya had fallen in love with, the quiet strength that had attracted her from their very first date. "Maya, 3 days ago, I was planning to spend the rest of my life with you. Yesterday, I thought that future was based on lies. Today, I know that the only lies came from someone who wanted to destroy what we have. If you're willing to fight for us, then so am I." They spent another hour at the cafe, calling Rebecca to initiate criminal proceedings and contacting Jennifer to ensure all digital evidence was properly preserved for law enforcement. Maya watched David transform from the broken man who'd walked in to someone ready for battle, and she felt their partnership reasserting itself in ways that were deeper and stronger than before Danny's attack. The drive to her parents' house felt different this time. Instead of driving alone into hostile territory, Maya sat beside David as he navigated the familiar route to Fremont. They'd made this trip dozens of times for family dinners and holidays, but never carrying evidence of betrayal that would fundamentally alter the Chen family forever.
"We need to talk," Maya said. "All of us. About Danny, about what really happened, about what comes next." They gathered in the living room where Maya had spent countless childhood evenings watching movies and playing board games. The late afternoon light slanted through windows that faced the small backyard where she learned to ride a bike and practice soccer moves. This room held 30 years of family memories, but Maya knew that after today, it would also hold the memory of the day their family shattered. Maya opened her laptop and began presenting the evidence, walking her parents through the same technical analysis she'd shown David. Patricia gasped audibly when she saw the recovered files from their home computer, confirmation that Danny had used their family space to orchestrate his campaign of destruction. William remained silent throughout the presentation, his expression growing darker as he absorbed the scope of his son's deception. When Maya finished, he sat quietly for several minutes, staring at the evidence reports with the focused attention of someone trying to reconcile new information with everything he'd believed about his family. "I need to see Danny," William said finally. "I need to hear his side of this." "Dad," Maya said gently, "there is no other side. The evidence is overwhelming and independently verified by multiple experts. Danny created fake evidence to destroy my relationship and my reputation, probably to improve his position regarding inheritance of your business." William's face flushed with anger, not at Maya's accusations, but at the implications for his life's work. "My business? He did this because of my business?" "The timing suggests it," Maya said, showing her father the financial analysis Rebecca had compiled. "Danny's insistent succession planning increased significantly over the past year, right around the time he started asking questions about my relationship with David and making comments about my fitness for business leadership." Patricia was crying quietly, pressing tissues to her eyes as she processed the evidence of her son's systematic cruelty. How did we not see this? How did we not know what he was capable of? It was a question Maya had been asking herself since discovering the truth. How do you recognize sociopathic behavior in someone you've loved since birth? How do you reconcile the caring brother who defended her against childhood bullies
with the calculating adult who'd tried to destroy her life for financial gain. "Where is Danny now?" David asked, his voice tight with controlled anger. "At work," Patricia said. "He should be home for dinner in about an hour." Maya and David exchanged glances. They discussed this moment during their drive, the confrontation that would determine whether Danny would accept responsibility or double down on his lies. "We'll wait," Maya said. "I want to see his reaction when confronted with proof of what he's done." They spent the next hour in tense conversation, with Patricia asking detailed questions about the investigation and William studying the business implications of Danny's actions. Maya could see her father's mind working through the ramifications, not just for their family relationships, but for the company he'd spent 30 years building. If Danny was willing to do this to his own sister, what would he be willing to do to business partners or employees who stood in his way? It was a sobering question that highlighted the broader implications of Danny's behavior. This wasn't just about family drama or inheritance disputes. It was about fundamental character traits that would affect every aspect of Danny's professional and personal life. At 6:47 p.m., they heard Danny's car in the driveway. Maya positioned herself at the kitchen table with her laptop open. The evidence report spread across the surface like a prosecutor's case file. David sat beside her while their parents flanked them in what felt like a tribunal arrangement.
Danny walked through the front door, calling out his usual greeting. "Mom, I'm home. Something smells amazing." But his voice died when he entered the kitchen and saw the assembled group, his eyes immediately focusing on the laptop screen displaying the recovered files from the family computer. "What's going on?" Danny asked, but Maya could see recognition in his eyes. He knew exactly what was happening. "Sit down, Danny," Maya said quietly. "We need to talk." For the next 30 minutes, Maya presented the evidence against her brother with the methodical precision of a criminal prosecutor. She showed him the technical analysis proving the screenshots were fake, the recovered files from the family computer documenting his creation process, the financial investigation revealing his motives. Danny's reaction was everything Maya had expected and worse. He didn't collapse under the weight of evidence or break down with remorse. Instead, he went on the offensive, claiming that Maya had fabricated the evidence against him, that she was trying to frame him to cover up her actual affair. "This is exactly what someone would do if they were really guilty," Danny said, his voice filled with apparent sincerity. "Create elaborate fake evidence to prove their innocence while destroying the person who exposed their lies." Maya marveled at his performance. Even faced with overwhelming proof of his deception, Danny was maintaining his fiction with such conviction that she could see doubt flickering in her mother's eyes. "Danny," David said, his voice carefully controlled, "I've seen the technical analysis. I understand digital forensics well enough to know that this evidence couldn't be fabricated at the level Maya would need to frame you. The metadata alone proves these files were created weeks ago on the family computer." "Metadata can be manipulated," Danny replied smoothly. "Anyone with basic technical knowledge knows that." It was a masterful deflection, using just enough technical truth to create confusion while avoiding the central fact that the evidence against him was overwhelming and independently verified. But William Chen had spent 30 years building a business by learning to distinguish truth from manipulation, and he'd been studying his son's face throughout this conversation with the focused attention of someone trying to solve a critical problem. "Danny," William said quietly, "look at me." Danny turned toward his father, and Maya saw something flicker across his features. Uncertainty, maybe even fear. "In 30 years in business, I've learned to recognize when someone is lying to me. It's a survival skill in my industry. And son, you're lying now." Danny's composure cracked for just a moment, long enough for everyone in the room to see the truth beneath his performance. But he recovered quickly, falling back on wounded indignation. "Dad, I can't believe you'd take Maya's word over mine. After everything I've done for this family, after all the ways I've tried to protect—" "Stop," William said, his voice sharp with authority. "Just stop.
Danny, your sister has presented overwhelming evidence of systematic fraud and manipulation. The only question now is whether you're going to accept responsibility or continue lying to people who love you." Maya watched her brother's face cycle through different emotions: anger, fear, calculation, desperation. She could almost see him trying different strategies in real time, searching for an angle that might salvage the situation. Finally, Danny chose the nuclear option. "Fine," he said, his voice cold with rage. "You want the truth? Maya has been having an affair with Marcus Rivera for 3 months. I have evidence that goes beyond those screenshots: hotel surveillance footage, credit card receipts, witness statements from people who saw them together. I was trying to protect this family from scandal, but if you want to destroy yourselves defending a cheater and a liar, that's your choice." The silence that followed was deafening. Maya felt her heart racing as she realized that Danny wasn't just doubling down on his original lies, he was threatening to escalate his campaign of fabrication to include additional fake evidence. But David's reaction surprised everyone, including Maya. He laughed. Not with humor, but with the bitter amusement of someone who just watched their opponent make a fatal tactical error. "Danny," David said, "you just made a critical mistake. Maya and I spent the past 3 hours going through her phone records, credit card statements, and work calendar for the past 6 months. We documented every hotel stay, every business dinner, every yoga class, every interaction with Marcus Rivera. If you really have additional evidence of an affair, then you'd be claiming Maya was in 2 places at once for dozens of different occasions." Danny's face went pale as he realized the trap he'd walked into. By claiming to have even more extensive evidence, he'd given Maya and David the opportunity to prove his lies were even more elaborate than they'd initially revealed. "Moreover," David continued, "by claiming to have hotel surveillance footage and witness statements, you've just admitted to having conducted systematic surveillance of my fiancé. In California, that's a felony." Maya felt a surge of admiration for David's tactical thinking. He'd turned Danny's escalation against him, transforming what should have been a stronger attack into evidence of additional crimes. Patricia was crying openly now, watching her son dig himself deeper into lies that were becoming increasingly desperate and dangerous. "Danny, please," she whispered, "just tell us the truth." For a moment, Maya thought he might break. She saw exhaustion in his eyes, the weariness of someone who'd been maintaining an elaborate fiction for so long that he'd lost track of what was real. But then Danny's expression hardened into something Maya had never seen before: pure, cold hatred directed at her. "You want to know the truth?" he said, his voice dripping with venom. "The truth is that Maya has always been the golden child. Perfect grades, perfect job, perfect fiancé. Meanwhile, I've worked twice as hard for half the recognition. Dad's business should go to someone who understands it, who's dedicated their career to it, not someone who's too busy playing house to care about the family legacy." The raw honesty was more damaging than any lie Danny had told. Maya saw her parents' faces register shock, not just at his admission of guilt, but at the depth of resentment he'd harbored for years. "So you decided to destroy your sister's life rather than prove yourself worthy of inheriting the business?" William asked, his voice heavy with disappointment. "I decided to level the playing field," Danny replied. "Maya's success has always come at my expense. This time, I made sure it was the other way around." Maya felt her phone buzz with a text message, then another. Word was spreading. Friends asking if she was okay, colleagues who'd heard rumors wanting clarification. Danny's poison was continuing to work its way through her life even as his lies were being exposed. "The criminal charges stand," Maya said quietly. "Danny, you've admitted to fraud, cyber harassment, and systematic stalking. You've caused measurable damage to my reputation and career. This isn't something that can be resolved with a family conversation and an apology." Danny's face twisted with rage. "You're going to have your own brother arrested? You tried to destroy my entire life for money. What did you think the consequences would be?" Patricia stepped between her children, her face streaked with tears but her voice steady with maternal authority. "Both of you, stop. This family is broken enough without more threats and recriminations."
But Maya knew there was no going back. Danny hadn't just betrayed her trust. He'd revealed a capacity for calculated cruelty that would poison every future interaction they might have. Even if she forgave him, even if criminal charges were dropped, she would never again be able to trust her own brother. The evening dissolved into painful logistics. William called the family lawyer to discuss the business implications of Danny's actions and the need to revise succession planning. Patricia retreated to her bedroom, overwhelmed by the collapse of everything she'd believed about her family. David and Maya gathered their evidence and prepared to leave, knowing they'd initiated a legal and emotional process that would take months to resolve. As they prepared to drive back to San Francisco, Danny appeared in the driveway, his face composed once again into a mask of wounded innocence. "Maya," he called out, "you're making a mistake. Pursuing this will hurt the whole family, not just me. Mom and Dad will never forgive you for having their son arrested." Maya stopped and turned to face her brother one last time. In the porch light, he looked younger, more like the boy who'd taught her to ride a bike and helped her with math homework. But she knew now that person had either never existed or had been systematically corrupted by jealousy and greed. "Danny," she said quietly, "the mistake was trusting you in the first place. Everything that happens next is a consequence of choices you made." As they drove away from the house where she'd grown up, Maya felt the weight of everything that had been lost. Not just her engagement, which was now being rebuilt, but her family, her brother, her faith in the people closest to her. David reached over and took her hand as they navigated the dark streets toward home. "Are you okay?" he asked. Maya considered the question seriously. 2 days ago, she was planning a wedding and dreaming about her future. Today, she was preparing to have her brother arrested and watching her family fractured beyond repair. "No," she said honestly, "but I will be." The investigation Rebecca had initiated was expanding beyond what anyone had anticipated. Federal prosecutors were interested in the case because of its implications for cyber fraud and the sophisticated nature of Danny's digital manipulation. The technical evidence had attracted attention from law enforcement agencies dealing with increasing numbers of deepfake and fabricated evidence cases. Maya found herself at the center of what legal experts were calling a landmark case about digital evidence, family betrayal, and the weaponization of technology for personal vendettas. News outlets picked up the story, and she received calls from reporters wanting to discuss the broader implications of fabricated evidence in domestic disputes. "This isn't just about your family," Rebecca explained during one of their strategy sessions. "Danny's methods are sophisticated enough that law enforcement wants to understand his techniques to help them identify similar cases. You're helping establish legal precedents that will protect other victims of this kind of manipulation." The thought that her personal nightmare might help prevent others from experiencing similar betrayal provided some comfort, but Maya struggled with the public attention. She'd always been a private person, and having her family's dysfunction dissected in legal briefs and news articles felt like a second violation. David became her anchor during this period, handling media requests and coordinating with our legal team, while Maya focused on rebuilding her professional reputation. The marketing firm where she worked had been supportive, but Maya knew some clients and colleagues would always harbor doubts about her character, regardless of how thoroughly Danny's lies were exposed. 3 weeks after the confrontation at her parents' house, Maya received a call that changed everything. "Maya, it's Rebecca. We found something else." Maya felt her stomach drop. She'd thought they'd uncovered the full scope of Danny's deception, but Rebecca's tone suggested there were additional layers to discover. "What did you find?" "Danny's been conducting surveillance on you for almost 8 months. Not just gathering information for the fake screenshots, actual physical surveillance. Following you to work, to yoga classes, documenting your routine and relationships. He has files on David, on your friends, on your coworkers. This wasn't just about the inheritance, Maya. This was about controlling and eventually destroying your entire life." The revelation hit Maya like a physical blow. She'd assumed Danny's campaign had been motivated by greed and sibling rivalry, but the scope of surveillance Rebecca had uncovered suggested something much darker, an obsessive need to control and dominate that went far beyond financial considerations. How extensive was the surveillance?
Hundreds of photos, detailed logs of your activities, even recordings of conversations he overheard when you were in public places. Maya, he's been treating you like a target for almost a year. Maya sank into her kitchen chair, the same one where she'd been sitting when David had shown her the fake screenshots that started this nightmare. The apartment that had once felt like a safe haven now felt exposed, violated by the knowledge that her own brother had been watching her most intimate moments and planning her destruction. Rebecca, what does this mean legally? It means additional felony charges for stalking and invasion of privacy. It also means Danny's behavior pattern is much more serious than we initially realized. This level of surveillance and planning suggests possible antisocial personality disorder. He's not just someone who made bad choices, he's someone who's fundamentally incapable of normal human empathy. The clinical language couldn't disguise the emotional impact of what Rebecca was saying. Maya's brother wasn't just a liar or a schemer. He was someone whose psychological makeup made him genuinely dangerous to the people around him. That evening, Maya and David sat on their couch reviewing the additional evidence Rebecca had provided. Photos of Maya taken without her knowledge, detailed notes about her conversations with friends, even speculation about her psychological vulnerabilities that could be exploited. "Jesus, Maya," David said, staring at a photo Danny had taken of them having dinner at their favorite restaurant 3 months ago. "He was watching us on our date nights, planning how to destroy us while we were just trying to enjoy each other's company." Maya felt violated in ways she couldn't articulate. Every private moment, every casual conversation, every intimate gesture had been observed and cataloged by someone she trusted completely. "I need to call my parents. They need to know what we've discovered." The conversation with Patricia and William was devastating. Hearing about the extent of Danny's surveillance and psychological manipulation, their grief transformed from sorrow about family conflict into genuine fear about their son's mental state. "Maya, honey, I'm so sorry," Patricia sobbed into the phone. "We had no idea how sick he was. We thought this was about money or jealousy, but this is something else entirely." William's response was more practical but equally disturbing. "Maya, your mother and I are going to change our locks and install a security system. If Danny has been capable of this level of deception and surveillance with you, we can't assume we're safe either." The thought that her parents now feared their own son was almost more than Maya could bear. Danny's actions had destroyed not just her life, but the fundamental sense of safety and trust that held their family together. 2 days later, Danny was arrested at his workplace by federal agents. The charges included wire fraud, cyber stalking, invasion of privacy, and conspiracy to commit identity theft. The arrest was covered by local news outlets, and Maya watched footage of her brother being led away in handcuffs, feeling a mixture of vindication and profound sadness. That evening, Patricia called Maya in tears. She said, "He wanted to speak with you. From jail. He asked me to give you a message."
Maya braced herself for another manipulation, another attempt by Danny to control the narrative, even from behind bars. "What did he say?" "He said he was sorry, that he knows he can't undo what he's done, but he wanted you to know that the brother you remembered from childhood was real, that the person who protected you and loved you existed, even if he got lost somewhere along the way." Maya was quiet for a long time, processing this final communication from the person who'd shaped so much of her understanding of family and trust. "Mom, do you believe him?" "I don't know, honey. I want to believe there's still something good in him, that maybe getting help will bring back the son I remember, but Maya, even if that's true, it doesn't change what he did to you. It doesn't make any of this okay." Maya agreed. Understanding Danny's psychology might help her process the betrayal, but it couldn't undo the damage he'd caused, or restore the innocence that had been lost when someone she loved had chosen to systematically destroy her life. 6 months after Danny's arrest, Maya and David stood in the rose garden of the Sonoma mansion they'd originally chosen for their wedding venue.
The late afternoon sun cast golden light across the perfectly manicured grounds, and Maya could hear the distant sound of caterers setting up tables for their reception. After everything they'd endured, they'd decided to keep their original wedding date, transforming what could have been a bitter reminder into a celebration of survival and renewal. The guest list was smaller than originally planned. Some friends and extended family members had distanced themselves during the legal proceedings, uncomfortable with the public nature of Danny's crimes or uncertain about the truth, despite overwhelming evidence. Maya had learned to accept these losses as the price of surviving her brother's assault on her life. But the people who remained, David's family, her closest friends, colleagues who'd stood by her during the investigation, felt more precious for having been tested by adversity. These were relationships built on genuine trust rather than convenience or assumption. Patricia and William sat in the front row, both aged by the events of the past year, but present to support their daughter's marriage. The family business had been restructured with new leadership and oversight systems designed to prevent the kind of calculated manipulation Danny had attempted. William had stepped back from day-to-day operations, recognizing that his son's betrayal had revealed dangerous vulnerabilities in both the company structure and his own judgment about character. Maya's wedding dress was different from the one she'd originally chosen, simpler, more elegant, reflecting the woman she'd become through surviving betrayal rather than the naive optimism of her previous self. As she walked down the aisle toward David, she felt the weight of everything they'd overcome together. The ceremony itself was small and intimate, focused on the promises Maya and David were making to each other rather than the elaborate celebration they'd originally planned. They'd written their own vows, and Maya's included acknowledgement of what they'd learned about trust, forgiveness, and the difference between love that was convenient and love that was tested by crisis. "David," Maya said, her voice steady despite the emotion threatening to overwhelm her, "6 months ago, someone tried to convince you that I was capable of betraying the person I love most. Your willingness to question that evidence, to demand proof, and ultimately to stand with me against lies designed to destroy us, showed me what real partnership looks like. I'm not just marrying the man I fell in love with 3 years ago. I'm marrying the man who fought for us when fighting seemed impossible." David's vows acknowledged his own growth through the crisis, his recognition that trust required not just faith but action, not just belief but verification. "Maya, I almost lost you because I was willing to believe the worst about someone I claimed to know completely. I learned that loving someone means not just trusting them, but being worthy of their trust in return. I promise to question accusations before I question you, to demand evidence before I demand explanations, and to remember that the person who stands beside me in crisis is the person I want beside me forever."
The reception was held in the same rose garden, with string lights creating a canopy of warm illumination as evening settled over the Sonoma Hills. Maya found herself genuinely happy for the first time since Danny's betrayal, surrounded by people who'd chosen to believe in her innocence and support her recovery. During the reception, Maya received an unexpected phone call from Rebecca, the private investigator who'd helped expose Danny's deception. "Maya, I'm sorry to interrupt your wedding day, but I thought you'd want to know. Danny's case just reached a plea agreement." Maya stepped away from the reception, finding a quiet corner of the garden where she could speak privately. "What kind of plea agreement?" 5 years in federal prison, followed by 3 years of supervised probation. He's also required to undergo psychological evaluation and treatment, and he's been ordered to pay restitution for the investigative costs and damages to your reputation. Maya felt a complex mix of emotions: relief that the legal proceedings were finally over, sadness that her brother would spend the next 5 years in prison, and a strange kind of closure, knowing that Danny would face meaningful consequences for his actions. "There's something else," Rebecca continued. "Danny's lawyers submitted a letter to the court as part of his plea hearing. He asked them to share it with you. Maya hesitated. She'd had no contact with Danny since his arrest, and part of her healing process had involved accepting that the brother she'd thought she knew had never really existed. Reading his letter felt like risking a reopening of wounds that were finally beginning to heal. What does it say? I can't share the details over the phone, but Maya, it's not what you might expect. It's not an attempt to manipulate or justify his actions. If you want to read it, I can send it to you after your honeymoon. Or you can choose never to see it. The choice is entirely yours. Maya thanked Rebecca and returned to her wedding reception. But the knowledge of Danny's letter lingered in the back of her mind. Throughout the evening, as she danced with David and celebrated with friends, she found herself wondering what her brother could possibly have written that wouldn't be an attempt to manipulate her one final time. 2 weeks later, Maya and David returned from their honeymoon in Italy, a trip that had been both celebration and healing, allowing them to focus on their relationship without the constant pressure of legal proceedings and media attention. Their apartment felt different when they returned, more genuinely theirs, now that the crisis had passed and they'd chosen each other again under the worst possible circumstances. Maya called Rebecca to request Danny's letter, surprising herself with the decision. She'd expected to want nothing further to do with her brother, but curiosity about his state of mind proved stronger than her desire to forget him entirely. The letter arrived 2 days later in a plain manila envelope with Rebecca's return address. Maya sat at her kitchen table, the same table where she'd planned her original wedding, where David had confronted her with fake evidence, where they'd rebuilt their relationship on more solid ground, and opened the envelope with trembling hands. Danny's handwriting was familiar from childhood birthday cards and school notes, but the tone of the letter was unlike anything she'd ever received from him. Maya, I know I have no right to contact you, and I understand if you choose not to read this or respond to it. I'm writing this letter not because I expect forgiveness, but because my therapist says taking responsibility requires acknowledging the full scope of harm I caused, not just the criminal charges I pled guilty to.
You asked why I did this, and I've spent 6 months in therapy trying to understand the answer myself. The truth is that I've been jealous of you since childhood, of your grades, your friends, your career, your relationship with David, your natural ability to make people like and trust you. Instead of using that jealousy as motivation to improve myself, I let it poison me into someone who could justify destroying the person I envied most. The inheritance was a rationalization, not a reason. I would have found some other excuse to attack you because I couldn't bear watching you succeed while I struggled. I became so consumed with competing against you that I forgot we were supposed to be on the same team. I know this letter can't undo what I did or restore what I destroyed. I know that our relationship is over, and that's a consequence I deserve and have to live with. I'm not asking for forgiveness because what I did is unforgivable. I'm not asking for contact because I forfeited any right to be part of your life. I'm writing this because I want you to know that the fault was entirely mine. Nothing you did caused my actions or justified them. You were a good sister who deserved a better brother than I chose to be. I hope you and David are happy together. I hope your career recovers from the damage I caused. I hope Mom and Dad can eventually forgive themselves for not seeing what I was becoming. And I hope that someday the memory of the brother who protected you in childhood won't be completely overshadowed by the brother who tried to destroy you as an adult. I'm sorry, Maya, for everything. Danny. Maya read the letter 3 times, searching for signs of manipulation or hidden agenda, but found none. It was the most honest communication she'd ever received from her brother, acknowledging responsibility without excuse and accepting consequences without plea for mercy. David found her at the kitchen table an hour later, still holding the letter and staring out the window at the San Francisco skyline. "How are you feeling?" he asked,
sitting down beside her. "Sad," Maya said after a long pause. "Not sorry for him exactly, but sad for all the years we wasted on this toxic dynamic. Sad for our parents, who lost both their children in different ways. Sad for the person Danny could have been if he'd chosen differently." David read the letter, his expression growing thoughtful as he absorbed Danny's words. "Do you believe he means it?" David asked. "I think so. But David, it doesn't change anything. Understanding why someone hurt you doesn't make the hurt disappear. Knowing that Danny recognizes his mistakes doesn't restore the trust he destroyed or undo the damage he caused." Maya folded the letter and put it back in its envelope, then placed it in the drawer of their agent table. She wouldn't throw it away, it was part of the historical record of what had happened to their family, but she wouldn't display it or refer to it regularly either. "What happens now?" David asked. Maya considered the question. Danny would serve his prison sentence and hopefully receive the psychological help he needed. Her parents would continue rebuilding their lives and their business. She and David would move forward with their marriage, stronger for having survived the worst thing that could happen to a relationship built on trust. Over the following months, Maya threw herself into rebuilding her professional reputation and helping her parents restructure the family business with better safeguards against future manipulation. The publicity from Danny's case had actually enhanced her career in unexpected ways. Clients appreciated her resilience and her expertise in crisis management, and she found herself consulting on other cases involving digital fraud and reputation recovery.
David's engineering firm promoted him to senior partner, recognizing his leadership during the crisis and his analytical skills in uncovering digital evidence. He also began volunteering with organizations that helped victims of cyberstalking and domestic digital abuse, using his technical knowledge to help others navigate similar situations. Maya's relationship with her parents slowly healed, though it would never return to its previous innocence. They'd all learned that family bonds, while strong, weren't unbreakable, and that love required constant choice and recommitment rather than simple assumption. A year after Danny's imprisonment, Maya received news that he'd been transferred to a minimum security facility and was participating in vocational training programs. She felt neither satisfaction nor disappointment at this information, just a distant hope that he might eventually become someone capable of healthy relationships, even if those relationships could never include her. The yoga studio where she'd met Marcus Rivera became a place of genuine peace, rather than the crime scene Danny had tried to make it. Marcus had been deeply affected by being unwittingly cast in Danny's fiction, but he'd also become an advocate for other victims of false accusations, using his meditation and mindfulness training to help people process trauma and betrayal. Maya continued attending his classes, finding in the practice of yoga a physical manifestation of the emotional work she'd done to heal from her brother's assault on her life. The breathing exercises that had once seemed like New Age mysticism now felt like practical tools for managing anxiety and maintaining emotional equilibrium. 2 years after the crisis, Maya and David bought a house in the Oakland Hills, a craftsman bungalow with a garden where Maya could grow vegetables and David could tinker with woodworking projects. The house represented their joint future in ways that felt more solid and intentional than their previous shared apartment. Maya kept the engagement ring David had thrown on their kitchen floor, but had it reset in a new setting that reflected their journey through crisis and renewal. The diamond was the same, but the context had changed. It now represented not just love and commitment, but the choice to rebuild trust after it had been systematically attacked. On the 3rd anniversary of Danny's arrest, Maya received news from the Victim Services Coordinator at the federal prison where he was incarcerated. "Miss Chen, your brother has requested permission to write to you again. Under the terms of his sentencing, he needs your explicit consent to initiate contact. You have the right to refuse this request, and there's no pressure to respond either way." Maya was quiet for a moment, considering whether she had any interest in further communication with a person who'd tried to destroy her life.
Thank you for asking, she said finally, but I'm not ready for contact. If my feelings change in the future, I'll reach out through the appropriate channels. The coordinator thanked her and hung up, leaving Maya with the knowledge that Danny was still thinking about her, but respecting her boundaries in ways he'd never done before his imprisonment. That evening, Maya and David sat on their back porch, watching the sunset paint the San Francisco Bay in shades of gold and pink. David was reading a technical manual for a project at work, while Maya reviewed marketing proposals for a new client campaign. It was an ordinary evening in an ordinary week, the kind of peaceful routine that Maya had learned to treasure after experiencing how quickly stability could be destroyed. They'd built this life consciously, making choices based on genuine compatibility rather than convenient assumption, creating something that could withstand stress because it was founded on tested trust rather than naive hope. This gripping tale follows Maya Chen Rodriguez, a successful marketing professional whose life is shattered when her own brother, Danny, orchestrates an elaborate scheme to destroy her reputation and steal her inheritance. What begins as a typical sibling rivalry in a family business escalates into a sophisticated campaign of digital manipulation and psychological warfare. Danny Chen, driven by jealousy over his sister's success and their parents' favoritism, creates an intricate web of fabricated evidence designed to frame Maya for embezzlement and professional misconduct. Using his intimate knowledge of Maya's life, relationships, and work habits, he manufactures convincing fake documents, manipulates digital records, and plants evidence that makes Maya appear guilty of serious crimes she never committed. The betrayal strikes at the worst possible time, just as Maya is planning her wedding to David, a loving partner who initially struggles to reconcile the evidence against Maya with his knowledge of her character. The manufactured scandal threatens not only Maya's career and reputation, but also her most precious relationships, as friends, colleagues, and even family members begin to question her innocence. As the investigation unfolds, Maya finds herself trapped in a nightmare where her own brother has weaponized their shared family history against her. Danny's manipulation is particularly insidious because it exploits the trust and intimate knowledge that should exist between siblings, turning family bonds into instruments of destruction. The turning point comes when forensic investigators, led by the determined Detective Rodriguez and supported by Maya's unwavering partner David, begin to uncover the sophisticated digital manipulation techniques Danny employed. Slowly, painstakingly, they unravel the false reality Danny constructed, revealing the calculated nature of his betrayal. The story explores profound themes about family loyalty, the nature of trust, and the psychological impact of intimate betrayal. Maya's journey isn't just about proving her innocence. It's about rebuilding her sense of reality after someone she trusted completely used that trust to try to destroy her life. Danny's eventual conviction brings legal justice, but the emotional healing takes much longer. Maya and David's relationship, tested by the crisis, emerges stronger than before. They marry, understanding that their love has survived the ultimate test. Maya transforms her traumatic experience into expertise, becoming a consultant who helps other victims of similar digital manipulation and family betrayal. 5 years later, Maya has built Chen Crisis Communications, specializing in helping others navigate sophisticated deception and manipulation. She and David are expecting their first child, having created a life of genuine happiness from the ashes of Danny's destructive attempts. Her parents, William and Patricia, have restructured their family business and undergone extensive therapy to understand how they inadvertently created the competitive dynamics that contributed to Danny's destructive behavior. The epilogue reveals Maya training law enforcement officers about digital manipulation, sharing her expertise to prevent others from experiencing similar betrayals.
She's been approached about participating in a documentary that would expose the sophisticated methods family members can use to destroy each other, helping society recognize and prevent such manipulation. The story concludes with Maya and David discussing how they'll eventually explain Uncle Danny's actions to their future children, balancing honesty about family complexity with age-appropriate protection of innocence. This powerful narrative demonstrates that while family betrayal can cause devastating damage, it doesn't have to define the victim's future. Maya's choice to rebuild rather than retreat, to trust again rather than close her heart, transforms her from victim to survivor to advocate for others facing similar crises. If this story resonates with you, please subscribe for more compelling tales of resilience, family dynamics, and the triumph of truth over deception. Your subscription helps us continue sharing stories that explore the complex relationships that shape our lives.